His lawyer leaned in and whispered a few words. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for Grant Halstead to hear. The color drained from his face. The confident smile he walked into the courtroom with collapsed in seconds. His shoulders stiffened. His hands began to tremble. The pen he had been signing with froze in midair, like it suddenly weighed too much. Across the table, I watched it happen. And for the first time in years, I smiled. But I am getting ahead of myself. Because to understand that moment, you need to understand who I was long before that courtroom. You need to understand how a woman everyone believed was weak, exhausted, and defeated quietly prepared the most patient exit of her life. My name is Savannah Cole. I am 33 years old. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. Until 3 months ago, I was married to Grant Halstead for 15 years. We have a son, Noah. He is 15. And every choice I made, every decision I delayed, every emotion I swallowed, was for him. From the outside, our life looked solid, a growing business, a comfortable home, the kind of stability people admire without asking questions. Grant was confident, respected, always talking about expansion and opportunity. I was rarely mentioned. I was the quiet wife, the woman standing slightly behind him at events, the one who smiled politely and kept everything running without needing recognition. So when Grant asked for a divorce and demanded the house, the company, and every asset, no one was surprised. What surprised everyone was how easily I agreed. What no one knew was that I had been waiting for him to make that exact mistake. If you have ever been underestimated, dismissed, or treated like you were replaceable, stay with me. Because this story is not about revenge. It is about patience, clarity, and knowing exactly when to let someone walk straight into the consequences of their own choices. Before Grant Halstead ever talked about building an empire, before anyone knew his name, I was just a quiet 17-year-old girl who liked order, numbers, and knowing where things belonged. I started working straight out of high school as a receptionist at a small accounting office in Raleigh. Nothing glamorous. Answering phones, filing invoices, making coffee for people who never remembered my name. But I liked it. I liked the rhythm of it. I liked that numbers told the truth even when people did not. Within a year, I was doing more than answering phones. I was helping with payroll reports, organizing client files, catching small errors before they became big problems. I learned quickly, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I needed stability. I needed something that felt solid. That was always me, practical, observant, quietly prepared. Grant came into my life like a storm that talked fast and dreamed big. He was older, charming, confident in a way that made people lean in when he spoke. He sold ideas the way other people sold cars, with certainty and a smile. He talked about the future like it was already his, custom homes, development projects, financial freedom. He made everything sound simple, like success was just a matter of wanting it badly enough. I believed him. Not because I was naive, but because I believed in work, and I believed that behind every confident man was someone keeping the details straight. My grandmother used to tell me one thing over and over, never loudly, never dramatically. Always know your numbers, always keep your footing, and never build your life on promises alone. At the time, I thought that meant being careful. I did not realize it also meant being patient. When Grant's construction and development business started gaining traction, he asked me to quit my job and help him full-time. He said he needed someone he could trust, someone who understood the details, someone who would protect the business the way he did. So I left my stable paycheck and stepped into his world. At first, it felt like teamwork. Long nights, shared plans, dreams sketched out at the kitchen table. I told myself this was what building something together looked like. But slowly, my role disappeared into the background. I handled the books, scheduled inspections, coordinated permits, called vendors when payments were late, and smoothed things over so Grant would not look careless. I answered emails, organized contracts, managed client expectations, fixed mistakes before they became visible. When payroll did not line up, I stayed up until midnight making it work. When a supplier threatened to walk, I talked them down. When clients panicked, I reassured them. At events, Grant was praised for his vision, for his leadership, for his success. I stood beside him smiling, introduced only as his wife. Over time, my name stopped being used at all. I was the one keeping the engine running while he enjoyed the applause. At home, things changed too. Decisions were made without me. Conversations became one-sided. Criticism replaced appreciation. The way I dressed was not polished enough. The meals were too simple. I was not ambitious anymore. That word cut deeper than he realized. Because ambition was the only reason any of this existed. I was carrying the weight of his dream while quietly being told I was not doing enough. And somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like a partner. I started feeling like the help. And the most dangerous thing about that feeling is not the exhaustion. It is the clarity that eventually comes with it. Grant told me he wanted a divorce on a Tuesday night. Not during a fight, not after an argument, just a calm announcement delivered at the kitchen table like a business update. I was making dinner, his favorite, the same meal I had cooked for years because it was familiar and easy and kept the peace. He sat down across from me and folded his hands. "I want a divorce," he said. No hesitation, no emotion, just a statement. Then he continued, as if he were outlining terms instead of ending a marriage. "I want the house, the business, the vehicles, everything tied to the company. You can keep Noah." He said keep Noah like our son was an inconvenience, like he was offering me something generous instead of abandoning responsibility. I remember staring at him, waiting for something else to follow, an explanation, an apology, anything that sounded human. Nothing came. 15 years together ended between the salt shaker and the napkin holder. No raised voices. No drama, just dismissal. What I did not know then was that this conversation was not spontaneous. He already had a lawyer. He already had documents drafted. He had been planning his exit while I was still balancing accounts and scheduling inspections. I felt shock, yes, but I also felt something quieter. Stillness. Because yelling would have given him control. Crying would have confirmed the story he wanted to tell. Arguing would have exposed me before I was ready. So I said very little. I nodded, I listened, I asked practical questions. And in that moment, while he believed he had just taken everything from me, I made a decision. I would not explode. I would not beg. I would not react. Because sometimes the smartest move is to let someone believe they are winning long before the game is actually over. The next morning, his mother arrived. Marlene Halstead walked into my house like she had been waiting for an invitation that never came. Perfect hair, soft voice, eyes sharp enough to measure what she could take. She patted my hand and sighed, the way people do when they are pretending to care. "You know," she said gently, "marriages take effort. Men need to feel appreciated. Maybe if you had tried a little harder, things would not have ended this way." I stood there listening as she explained my marriage to me like I was a slow student. Marlene had always treated me like I was temporary, like I was lucky to be here, like her son had rescued me from obscurity. Now she felt comfortable saying it out loud. Within weeks, Grant started bringing her around. Kelsey Lane, 27, worked at his company. Of course she did. She walked through my kitchen like she owned it, used my blender, drank from my favorite mug, sat on my couch scrolling through her phone while I stood there pretending not to exist. She painted over the kitchen walls, a dull gray. I had spent weeks choosing that green. It mattered to me, she did not ask. Grant watched it happen and said nothing. He let her rearrange my home before I had even moved out. That was the moment I realized something important. They thought I was already gone. They believed I had no claim, no voice, no power. So I did exactly what they expected. I stayed quiet. I packed slowly. I acted small. And I let them underestimate me completely. Because when people think you are finished, they stop watching what you do next. Through all of this, I leaned on one person I believed was on my side. Paige Brennan had been my closest friend since our early 20s. She knew every version of me. The tired new mother. The woman juggling work and marriage. The one who always tried to smooth things over instead of making noise. When Grant asked for the divorce, Paige was the first person I called. She came over with wine, sat on the floor with me while I cried, told me I deserved better, told me Grant was making a mistake. But something felt off. She asked questions that lingered a little too long. What was I planning to do next? Was I going to fight for the house? Had I spoken to a lawyer yet? Where was I thinking of moving? At first, I thought she was just concerned. Then Grant started knowing things before I said them out loud. If I mentioned to Paige that I was considering a certain neighborhood, Grant would casually comment that it was out of my price range. If I told her I might ask for more time, Grant suddenly pushed for speed. The pattern became impossible to ignore. I thought back over the years, the way Paige always lit up when Grant entered a room, the way she laughed just a little too hard at his jokes, the way she asked about him first every time we spoke. She was not just listening to me. She was reporting. I never confronted her. Confrontation would have shut the door too early. Instead, I adjusted. I shared less truth and more exhaustion. I told her I was tired, that I wanted it over, that I could not fight anymore. Within hours, Grant would relax. Paige thought she was helping him stay informed. What she was really doing was helping me confirm that my silence was working. Sometimes the best way to handle betrayal is not to expose it. It is to let it keep talking. The hardest part of all of this was not losing my marriage. It was watching my son get pulled into the middle of it. Noah saw everything, the tension, the new girlfriend, his grandmother packing my things like I was disposable. He watched his father speak to me with indifference instead of respect. And Grant knew exactly how to frame the story. He never raised his voice, he never insulted me directly in front of Noah, he simply planted ideas. Your mom is making this harder than it needs to be. I just want everyone to be happy. I am trying to be fair. Slow, careful sentences that made me sound unreasonable without ever saying it outright. Noah started pulling away from me, not angry, just unsure, quieter than usual, watching instead of asking. I could feel the shift when he stopped telling me small things, when his answers became shorter, when he looked at me like he was trying to decide which version of the truth made more sense. I wanted to explain everything. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to tell him how wrong his father was. But I did not. Because children do not need adult chaos, they need consistency. They need calm. They need time to see things clearly on their own. Grant would buy something expensive and then complain about money being tight. He would say no to school expenses while upgrading his lifestyle. The contradictions piled up. I watched Noah notice. One evening, he sat across from me at our small apartment table and asked quietly, "Is Dad actually doing okay financially?" I looked at him and asked a question instead. "What do you think?" He thought for a moment. Then he said, "Something feels off." I reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. Just give it time. Because if there was one thing I was certain of, it was this. I could lose a house, I could lose a business, I could lose a marriage. But I would not lose my son. And everything I was doing was to make sure of that. 2 years before Grant asked for a divorce, I found the truth by accident. It was a late night. Grant said he was working late again. I was at the dining table with my laptop, going through the company accounts the way I always did, checking numbers, matching transfers, making sure nothing looked off. Something looked off. A transfer to an account I did not recognize, then another one, then another, all slightly different amounts, all spaced just far enough apart to avoid attention. I followed the trail. What started as curiosity turned into dread. The house we lived in, the one everyone admired, did not belong to us the way I thought it did. It had 3 mortgages, not 1, 3, each one taken out quietly over time. The business was worse. Credit lines maxed out, vendor balances that never fully cleared, taxes paid late and sometimes not at all, equipment leased instead of owned, cars that looked impressive but were nothing more than expensive monthly promises. On paper, Grant looked successful. In reality, everything was held together by debt and timing. I sat there in the dark, scrolling through statements, realizing that our life was not built on stability. It was built on momentum. As long as money kept moving, no one noticed the cracks. I finally understood why he hated questions, why he avoided details, why he needed control. He was not building security. He was performing it. The best way I can explain it is this: our life looked like a beautiful movie set, perfect from the front, empty behind the doors, nothing real holding it up. I thought about confronting him, demanding answers, exposing everything. But I knew Grant. If I accused him, he would deny it, minimize it, twist it, He would make it sound like I was panicking over nothing. And worse, he would start protecting himself from me. So I did not say a word. Instead, I paid attention. I documented everything quietly: dates, amounts, accounts, patterns, kept copies where he could not find them. I stayed calm, I stayed useful. And I waited. Because men like Grant do not slow down when they are scared. They speed up. They borrow more, spend more, take bigger risks to keep the image alive. All I had to do was let him keep going. That night changed everything. Not because I decided to leave, but because I decided to stop being blind. And once you see the numbers clearly, you never unsee them. That was the moment I stopped reacting to Grant and started preparing for the day he would finally ask for more than he could afford. I just did not know how perfectly he would do exactly that. Once I understood the truth, my focus shifted. Not to revenge, not to confrontation, to protection. My grandmother's voice stayed with me. Always know your numbers, always keep something that is yours alone. I had 2 things Grant could not touch. The first was my retirement account from my early years in accounting. I had rolled it over when I left my job, but I never mixed it with household money. It sat quietly, growing, separate. The second was an inheritance my grandmother left me years earlier. She had been very clear in her will. That money was for me alone. I had kept it in a separate account, never using it for bills, never letting it blur into marital expenses. Together, it was enough to protect my son's future if I was careful. I worked with a trusted attorney and a relative who understood finances to create a trust for Noah. The money went there, not in my name, not in Grant's, locked and protected. It was not about hiding money, it was about respecting the rules that already existed. Then I organized everything. Every loan document, every statement, every liability Grant had created without explaining it. Copies restored safely, digitally and physically. Nothing dramatic, just disciplined. And then I returned to my role. I acted normal, helpful, quiet, supportive. I let Grant believe nothing had changed. That was the hardest part. Sitting across from someone who had put us at risk and pretending I did not know. Watching him spend while knowing the consequences were growing heavier by the month. But strategy requires patience. If I had moved too early, he would have adjusted. He would have protected himself. He would have rewritten the story. Instead, I let him stay comfortable. I let him believe I was unaware. I let him believe I was dependent. And when the time came when he finally decided he no longer needed me, everything was already in place. Protection does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like silence, discipline, and waiting until the law is already on your side. That was the choice I made. Not to fight loudly, but to be ready. When the divorce became real, I hired an attorney. Her name was Tessa Moreno, early 50s. Calm voice, sharp eyes. The kind of woman who listens more than she talks. She reviewed the basics and nodded in a way I recognized. She assumed this would be a standard case. Long marriage, shared business, a fight for half. You helped build this, she said. You are entitled to more than you think. I thanked her and placed 3 binders on her desk. She opened the first one slowly, then the second, then the third. The room went quiet. Tessa stopped taking notes. She leaned back and looked at me differently, not with pity, with respect. You have known about this for a while, she said. 2 years, I replied. She did not ask why I waited, she already understood. Together we built the plan. I would not fight for assets. I would not argue about ownership. I would give Grant exactly what he wanted. The house, the business, the vehicles. Along with every obligation attached to them. In exchange, I asked for a modest cash settlement and shared custody of Noah. Nothing flashy. Nothing that raised suspicion. Tessa nodded slowly. He thinks winning means possession, she said. He has not checked the weight of what he is picking up. That was the moment everything shifted. This was no longer about surviving a divorce. It was about stepping out clean while someone else insisted on carrying what they refused to understand. And for the first time since Grant announced he was leaving, I slept without fear. Because the outcome was no longer emotional. It was already written in numbers. The mediation sessions began a few weeks later. I showed up exactly how everyone expected me to. Quiet, tired, careful with my words. I kept my eyes down and my voice soft. I asked for very little and apologized more than I needed to. I said things like, I just want this to be over and I do not want to cause problems. Grant relaxed almost immediately. He leaned back in his chair, spoke with confidence, corrected small details like he was teaching a lesson. He believed I had already accepted defeat. When Tessa mentioned reviewing the full financial picture, Grant shut it down. There is no need for an audit, he said. I know my business. We are wasting time. His lawyer hesitated, suggested slowing down, suggested confirming values. Grant refused. He was impatient. Kelsey wanted things finalized. He wanted his new life to start without delays. So he signed a waiver. A simple document stating that his attorney had advised further review and that he declined. He barely read it. Meanwhile, Paige kept calling. I told her I was exhausted, that I could not afford a long fight, that I just wanted peace. Within hours, Grant would soften even more. He stopped double-checking details. He stopped being cautious. Because when someone believes you are broken, they assume you are harmless. Behind the scenes, Tessa and I stayed focused. Every document was prepared carefully. Every page clear, every number correct. There was nothing hidden, nothing misleading. Just truth, organized and waiting. Mediation ended quickly. Grant walked out confident, smiling, certain he had won. I walked out quietly, calm, already free. Sometimes strength is not loud. Sometimes it is the discipline to play the role that lets the truth do all the work later. The final hearing took place on a Thursday morning. The courtroom was quiet in that formal, uncomfortable way. Wood benches, paper shuffling, the low hum of other people waiting for their own endings. Grant arrived early, dressed sharply, confidence intact. His mother sat a few rows behind him, posture straight, already looking satisfied. Kelsey waited outside in the hallway, pacing, checking her phone, eager for the moment this would all be official. I arrived a few minutes later. Simple dress, no jewelry, hair pulled back. I looked exactly like a woman who had already lost. The judge reviewed the file and asked the standard questions. Did we understand the agreement? Were we entering it voluntarily? Had we been advised by counsel? I answered calmly, clearly. Yes. The documents were passed across the table. Grant signed quickly, page after page, barely slowing down. This was paperwork to him, a formality standing between him and his new life. Then his lawyer paused. I watched him as he reached the final section, the addendum, the liability disclosure. His brow furrowed, he flipped back a page, then forward again. He stopped breathing for a moment. He leaned toward Grant and whispered. Not loudly, not dramatically. You are assuming all debt. Grant froze. He pulled the papers closer and started reading for real. Numbers he had ignored suddenly demanded attention. Mortgages, credit lines, tax balances, lease obligations, all attached to the assets he had insisted on taking. He looked up, confused then angry. This is wrong, he said. She hid this. The judge stopped him immediately. Your attorney advised review. You declined. You signed a waiver acknowledging that choice. Grant tried again, claimed misunderstanding, claimed unfairness. The judge did not raise her voice. These are your liabilities, she said. You chose to assume them. The agreement stands. Grant turned toward me, his confidence gone. You knew, he said quietly. I met his eyes. I worked in your business for years. I knew exactly what I was signing away. The room went silent. The judge finalized the agreement. The gavel came down. And just like that, it was over. He got everything he asked for, and all of the weight that came with it. The collapse did not take long. Within weeks, the shine wore off. The confidence Grant carried out of the courtroom dissolved under phone calls he could not ignore. Banks, vendors, advisors asking questions he no longer had answers for. Kelsey left first. She packed quickly, quietly, and without speeches. The lifestyle she signed up for had come with invoices she was not interested in sharing. She disappeared the same way she arrived, conveniently and without accountability. Grant tried to sell the house, but when you owe more than something is worth, there are no buyers. Only conversations about short sales and warnings about missed payments. The business followed. Suppliers demanded payment. Credit tightened. Projects stalled. The momentum that once hid the truth turned into pressure that exposed it. Marlene changed her tone. She sent messages through Noah, apologies wrapped in concern, requests to talk, explanations that arrived far too late to matter. Paige called once, her voice shaky. She said she never meant for things to go this far, that she did not realize how serious it was. I did not argue, I did not explain. Some betrayals do not deserve a response. I stayed focused on rebuilding, on creating stability, on keeping my world quiet and predictable for Noah. Because watching consequences unfold does not require participation. Sometimes the most powerful move is stepping aside and letting reality finish the conversation for you. Noah did not need explanations. He watched. He saw the contradictions his father could no longer hide, the sudden stress, the changed routines, the excuses that stopped making sense. One evening he sat across from me at our small apartment table, no phone, no distractions. He looked older than he had a few months before. "Mom," he said, "is Dad actually in trouble?" I took a breath. I did not criticize, I did not blame. I simply said, "Sometimes people borrow from tomorrow too many times." He nodded slowly. A few weeks later, after another canceled promise and another tense call, he hugged me. Not the quick kind, the kind that lingers. I knew then that he understood. Not the details, not the numbers. But the truth? That stability matters more than appearances. That honesty shows up eventually. That quiet does not mean weak. With the settlement money, we furnished our apartment properly. Nothing fancy, just solid, comfortable, ours. I enrolled in evening courses related to operations and interior planning, skills I had shelved while building someone else's dream. My first client was a woman starting over after a long marriage. She stood in her empty living room and asked me how to begin. I told her the only honest answer I had. One decision at a time. One calm step forward. That was the moment I realized I had not just escaped something painful. I had built something new. And it was stronger than what I left behind. A few months after everything was finalized, I sat alone in our quiet living room one evening after Noah went to bed. The apartment was smaller than the house we left behind. The furniture did not match. The walls were plain. But every choice in that space was mine. I thought about my grandmother, about the way she used to speak softly but never vaguely. She believed in facts, in preparation, in knowing where you stand even when others try to move you. She was right. Here is what this experience taught me. Love should never require blindness. Security should never depend on appearances. And silence is not weakness when it is chosen with intention. Know your numbers. Know your rights. And never assume someone else is protecting your future just because they benefit from it. I did not win because I was cruel. I did not win because I was lucky. I won because I paid attention. Because I stayed patient. Because I chose clarity over chaos. And most importantly, because my son now knows what calm strength looks like. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever been underestimated or forced to start over quietly, I hope it reminded you of something important. You are not late. You are not weak. And it is never wrong to protect yourself with wisdom. If you found value here, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to The Art of Revenge for more stories about truth, resilience, and quiet strength. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. Thank you for listening. I will see you in the next story.